Dr. Laura Siller from Project Bread. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the updated news on the USDA food security report. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so tell us, what is the USDA food security report, and why is it so vital for organizations like Project Bread?
So, the USDA Food Security Report is an annual report. It comes out every year and has for, in October, it will be 29 years. What it really does is it measures the scope and problem of food insecurity in our country. And the report tells us how many households in the country in any given year are struggling to access food. We in the anti-hunger space have considered the USDA food security report to be the gold standard in terms of measuring food insecurity. We look at trends year over year. What we know about last year is that the rate of food insecurity in the United States was higher than it had been in previous years, dating back to 2014.
Wow.
We've been seeing substantial increases in food insecurity over the last 2 years. And the estimate that they put out for the 2023 report is that roughly 18 million American households are experiencing food insecurity, which translates to almost 14% of American households.
The thing that everybody's sort of talking about, and that's at the top of everybody's mind, is this food security report was canceled by the federal government. It will no longer be happening this year. Am I wrong?
So this year, the 2024 report is coming out. It is slated to come out October 22nd. So that's the timeline for that report. But after that, the survey is no longer happening. So they're not going to be collecting data to look at trends in 2025. The USDA report provides what we consider a national context for allowing us to compare these state level trends and what's happening across the country. It helps validate our approach and our findings to ensure that we're not sort of missing out on these broader trends that could affect communities. So without this, we really are losing what we consider a standardized benchmark, which makes it harder for us to advocate for policies effectively.
And that's absolutely devastating. Like you said, this vital, extremely sensitive and expensive information to gather is now going to sort of basically cease to exist in the future. So what's the solution here? What are organizations like Project Bread doing to sort of prepare for this? Do you have your own research on food insecurity, and do you need the USDA report to compare it to? How is this going to affect us in the future?
So one of the things that the report allows us to do is to see that trend and make space for us to do targeted intervention research. So yes, Project Bread conducts our own research at both the state and local level, and we've used these benchmarks of food insecurity to think about our research agenda and where we want to put resources towards. Our work broadly looks at local level hunger trends, school meal participation, so the efficacy of things like universal free school meals, SNAP engagement, and barriers to access are all studies that we've completed. One of the things that the report does is it provides insight into how often and to what extent households are experiencing limited access to food, especially for children. And one interesting thing that we've been seeing in data is that the rate of very low food security among children has been declining since 2020.
Wow.
So fewer children had severely disrupted eating patterns. And our research at Project Bread shows that the rate of children eating school meals in Massachusetts has substantially increased since the introduction of permanent free school meals. So the data in the report supports our continued efforts to champion permanent free school meals programs throughout the country. The other thing that the report allows us to do is it allows us to look at state and regional comparisons showing areas with higher or lower prevalence of food insecurity. Despite being a state with a very high cost of living, Massachusetts consistently has lower rates of food insecurity than any other state in the country. We're in like the top 7 of lowest rates.
Wow.
And we can really attribute that to all of the work that's done at the state level to ensure that folks in Massachusetts have access to food. And it really helps us create those targeted interventions to support food access across the state.
This is devastating. It's going to affect generations in the future tremendously. Who will be, more vulnerable from this lack of transparency from the federal level?
Well, I think to step back and talk about how it's going to affect folks in the future, one thing we know is that when large data sets like this are discontinued, they often do not come back historically. So the reality is that this likely won't survive, which is really problematic for a lot of reasons. In terms of who's the most vulnerable from a federal transparency sort of angle, I'd say we're all vulnerable, right? Everyone in the country is vulnerable. Relative to this report and food insecurity, populations particularly at risk include low income populations, children, people with disabilities, and our elders. Those groups of folks rely very heavily on federal nutrition programs like SNAP and school meals. They're oftentimes also dually enrolled in Medicaid. So without accurate information, it's harder for organizations and policymakers to identify what help is needed. Communities that are already facing severe challenges around food insecurity are going to receive even less support because the need isn't clearly documented. For us, a major concern is around the reconciliation bill. So, in the context of this report, we're going to be losing sort of a national tool to help us track how households across the United States and in Massachusetts are being impacted by changes in SNAP and Medicaid that are included in that bill, really making it harder for us to hold our government accountable for harms that may have been caused as a result of these changes. And it's also harder for us to advocate for state level policies to mitigate the harm. In Massachusetts, when we look at the rate of food insecurity, we've been able to say, hey, state level legislators, these are things that we think are important solutions to change that trend. And Massachusetts has stepped up. We can attribute this lower rate to a whole host of state level policies and programs championed by our legislators and the governor, including time limited supplemental state funded SNAP benefits, continuing free school meals once federal waivers ended, investing in summer meals programs for kids and teens, and continuing to fund really critical programs like the Healthy Incentive Program to ensure that SNAP recipients can afford local, fresh, nutritious food from our local farmers.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely incredible. SNAP does so much work, especially in our state. And, not having access to the data that will help people receive those benefits is a nightmare. And, what can viewers do to help the situation? Is there anything we can do? Is there somebody we can call, something we can do to help people who are going to be facing food insecurity because of the cancellation of this report?
I think there's a few things. The most critical is really raising awareness of the issue. There's not a community in Massachusetts that doesn't face or have folks struggling with food insecurity. So, even talking about food insecurity helps to reduce stigma and encourages broader support for those who are struggling. Another thing we could do is, we can't let our government quietly roll back years of data collection and progress. If we don't like what's happening, contact your legislators. Tell them that this is unacceptable, that you want them to work towards reinstating critical reports and data like this. And then the third is to become an advocate yourself. If you're interested in engaging in ending hunger, the strongest voice is your own, and being a part of the movement to end hunger in Massachusetts is a great way to start.
Right. And so, how can people start that movement towards ending hunger in Massachusetts? Where can viewers learn more about Project Bread and any other resources that you have?
So folks can visit our website at projectbread.org, where you can hear about our policy and advocacy work, our direct service work, our community engagement work. All are housed within our website. If you'd like to help work towards ending hunger with our Massachusetts coalition, you can join the Make Hunger History Coalition by visiting makehungerhistoryma.org. And if you or someone you know is struggling to access food, they can call or text or chat our anonymous hotline at 1 800 645 8333. We can provide services for folks in 180 different languages and for folks who are hearing impaired. Regardless of whether or not this data exists, we know that hunger exists and we're going to do everything that we can to support families and people in need.
Incredible. Thank you so much for the absolutely essential work that you guys do at Project Bread, and good luck during this, and we will make it out. We will.
Thank you so much for having me.